We're live. Here we are. We're live indeed. What a pleasure to be here, everyone. Excited to join you for this panel. I think we can just go ahead and kick off. Pleased to welcome Jennifer, Jeff, and Marco here. I'll read intros in just a second. Firstly, I can introduce myself. The least interesting thing you'll hear today. My name is Alex Farr, the Chief Customer Officer at Zaza and the founder of the Customer Success Excellence Awards, which is the world's first awards program dedicated to customer success. And most importantly, I'm delighted to be your host today. I'm immediately off script, calling in from Lisbon, Portugal. Let's get the audience engaged. If you guys want to kind of chat your locations about where y'all are around the world, I'm sure that'll be a fun little thing to, I got Sunnyvale, California. I was born, okay, not about me today. The session today, more importantly, is talking about change and how things have shifted in the world of customer success. As the economy changes, companies are seeing that customer success needs to go beyond the defensive posture of just sustaining customers. And I think it's pretty clear we've entered into a new territory, playing a bigger role in expansions and renewals than we have before. I don't think it's controversial to say that things are different than they were a year ago. It's probably the understatement of the session today. The golden age of growth at all costs is over. The static customer success playbooks from years past don't cut it anymore in this new economic reality. And that means our trusted customer success compass that we have used to navigate our role and strategy is less useful than it was. So today we want to learn how our panelists and how you are adapting. Are these changes shaking your team and opening up new opportunities? Let's talk about the past year and how it's impacted your approach. If you've made any changes, it's all about sharing our experiences and learning from one another. So let's begin. I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. I'll read a very quick intro and we'll quickly get into the heart of our conversation. Marco is a director of customer success, a team leader and manager of managers on a mission to democratize neurodiversity. A seasoned AI explorer, top 100 customer success strategist in 2021 and 2022. And it spent 12 years at Microsoft, 2 years at VMware, and 5 years at Vodafone, that's the one, and purports to be a cultural chameleon as well.
Thank you.
Jeff worked in finance. Thank you. Welcome, Marco. Jeff worked in finance during 2008, and this most recent tech recession, while at GitLab, he's helped tech and non-tech companies run effective customer success motions with and without much funding. Welcome, Jeff. And finally, Jennifer. Jennifer has been at Zoom since 2021, coming out of Zoom's explosive growth in the pandemic with the increasing demand for consolidation of tools. She and her team have shifted their focus on protecting the base and driving customer awareness of Zoom solutions in the collaboration space. Jennifer, welcome to the panel as well. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and jump right in. I would like to begin with a lightning round. Because we're going to talk a lot today about how things have changed, but I think one of the key questions that divides us in customer success is, should CSMs own revenue and why? And if you think they should, what type of revenue? Let's get it all out there. Let's share our biases, and then we can get into the conversation. So Jennifer, I'll start with you. Lightning round, killer question. Should CSMs own revenue and why?
Yes, but with a few dependencies, I think. And so I will say this. So to start, really around knowing the skill set in the CSMs, right? So do they have the experience of a commercial motion? And if they don't, are we as leaders upskilling or coaching CSM or hiring the right talent, right, to drive revenue growth? I think also understanding the maturity of the organization and its existing resources and processes in place. So we need to make sure we have the right tools and materials to be able to really drive accountability with metrics and also measure impact. And the most important, I think, also is around leadership sponsorship. So similar to any sales team, right? We need to make sure we have leaders in place to be able to support, maintain, and foster those relationships, especially around business decision makers, in order to really drive that revenue growth.
That is a very thorough and complete answer, and I tend to agree. Let's keep running around the screen here. Jeff, over to you. CSM, should they own revenue and why? Let's get the lens out there. I know, tough question.
Yeah. Yes, and it might be for some companies like at GitLab and other companies, you might have renewal managers owning the renewal, and then CSMs are taking part. I think they should still be comped on it. I think customer success overall should own it, and I think it's more something to be divided, whether it is the CSM or a renewal manager that owns renewals. And then I think at various stages, the company should have CSMs own upsells and cross sells.
Brilliant. Marco, you want to complete the trio here? Let's get your thoughts.
I have to say yes, but we have to be careful. We are not salespeople. I mean, the byproduct is always the same, right? It's dollars, it's pounds, yens, coins, but we can't forget we are on the side of the customer. So we have to ensure that we get what they really need. And then the why is, actually, it's a very tricky question because there's two sides to it. So the first one is, yes, revenues is actually something that can elevate us as customer success. It can become the metric, and maybe it's always been, right? NRR, it's always been there. But the second side to this question is, do we have a choice? Because with everything that is happening around, really, we need to protect our teams. And one way to do that is to elevate the conversation of customer success. And obviously, if you bring the dollar sign into the conversation, that gives you more power and more weight when you position and establish yourself.
Spot on. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, it's important that we don't become salespeople. It's very egotistical and self-serving for me to say that we should be farmers and not hunters. And I did not legally change my name to work in my profession. So I think you're spot on. Enough jokes. I'd love to ask the audience now. I'm going to publish a poll just to get everybody's opinion. I think I have done that appropriately. You should now see a poll that has been published live. Would love to understand your thoughts on where revenue ownership should sit. And part of the reason why we're asking this question is because, as we established at the beginning of this panel, things are changing. The comfort of sustaining customers is not good enough anymore, and we need to get more value from our customer success investment. So I think it's just important to kind of establish how we enter this conversation, let's say. And it looks like the audience enters this conversation in a very similar way that we as panelists have, which is great. So we're already, I guess, kind of further along on that evolution than some, or at least 68% of us are. So as I mentioned, things are changing, new business is drying up, and we need to drive revenue from existing customers. Companies are now also being asked to do more with less. So CSMs need to return their investment. So the question is, and Jeff, let's start with you. In terms of CSM's involvement in revenue, how has your team changed their involvement in the last year or two in response to the changing economic times? Have you seen customer success professionals change their approach to actively driving expansion and upselling efforts? Maybe you can give us a bit of context there.
Yeah, happy to. So a couple things. One, I think we need to keep in mind that in this economic environment where the weighted cost of capital is going up with interest rates and whatever else, mostly interest rates actually at this point, that's driving up costs for delivering value to customers through CSMs. It's harder to get funding. It's harder to get more funding or funding that we were used to getting, and so everything is harder to do. So it's pushing a lot of pressure in the ability for us to deliver. And every role within a company needs to be aligned to, really, most roles in companies, there are exceptions, should be aligned to either delivering the value to the customer, selling the value to the customer, or developing the value to the customer. So developing the product, selling it, or delivering. So some things that we're doing from a customer success motion are exploring the paid lifecycle model. So think of a bundle for the customer to be able to say, hey, I bought the product and now I need help deploying it. So that could be a bundle of services, including professional services, higher tier with support, education, certifications, a paid CSM, all of those things to make the customer actually successful with it. So that might be some lightweight professional services. Maybe it's not a full-blown professional services engagement, because the customer might be hesitant to say, oh, I don't need that. But if you can offer them some lightweight service, that might be beneficial and might be something they can get behind. The idea behind that is, of course, getting a faster time to value for the customer, enriching the usage of the product, getting everyone comfortable with it, making sure that you're not just working just with your couple key contacts, but that you're working more broadly across the overall organization. So that's one point. Another one is more integrated renewal forecasting between our renewal managers, our CSMs, and our AEs. Before that, a couple of years ago, there was less of that. It was a little bit more disjointed. And so now each person is individually highlighting risks, and that can bubble up and surface any dissonance. So if a CSM thinks there's a risk, but the renewal manager doesn't, or the AE thinks there's risk, but the CSM does not, it helps highlight that and bring about a discussion to say, hey, I saw you mark this customer as red, I marked it as green. What's going on? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And that's helping to create that adjustment is helping to highlight any risk early on in an account. And then across the regions and across the board overall, getting us to a better ability to forecast. And I've seen other companies take that on as well.
That's really interesting, and I think you're thinking with that outside in, right? About the customer. There's not these silos and departments that sit in this static journey: sales, account management, customer success. It's we all have our opinions. Let's get together around that one customer and kind of bash it out and come up with a plan. Right, so you're reacting earlier. Super interesting. Jennifer, I'll bring you in here. How are your CS teams adjusting in terms of involvement or impacting revenue given the changing times?
Yeah, I will say it's quite a bit of a change in mindset, especially like, as you said in the intro, after Zoom's explosive growth. So kind of similar to what Jeff was saying, right? Kind of this downturn economy, we're seeing a lot of conservative measures when it comes to any greenfield or upsell opportunities. So CSMs are really tasked to protect the base, focus on adoption more than ever, but not just with the day-to-day contacts or the same people that we speak to every day, right? But looking at additional use cases, lines of business, and really drive full platform expansion. So looking at what are the other duplication of tools that we can possibly replace. And this really means understanding the customer. So it's really performing a lot of discovery. So looking at their business priorities, buying decisions, existing tech stack, and innovating alongside the customer. So a lot of the CSMs at Zoom are becoming much more consultative, and I will be a bit controversial here and say they are more solution selling. Like they're looking at the technology in a way of how can I really solve their business problems with our product, and also be more in the way that we engage with customers. So through workshops, through more POCs, or in product innovation sessions, which then really lead to higher adoption and then that expansion organically.
Really interesting. And I think there's a book that I'm going to butcher the title of that says slow down, sell more, or sell faster, or something like that. And don't look it up. I've completely gotten that wrong, but you get the point, right? So it's a really less transaction, ticking boxes on kind of a customer journey map, and more, stepping out into the customer, really understanding, as you say, their business to drive a more, let's say, strategic and overarching outcome that at the end of the day is probably bigger. Is that a fair summary?
You nailed it, Alex.
Well, okay, that's too bold, but yes, no, you nailed it. Marco, let's jump to you here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about involvement in revenue, but I'd also love to maybe ask you also about other adjustments that you've seen in implementing the response to the evolving market conditions that don't necessarily link to revenue. So let's touch on the revenue question, but let's broaden the question also to talk about non-revenue things as well.
Okay.
And actually, I'm going to use, I don't know what power I have as a host, but I did forget to mention, if you're in the audience, you have questions. I now know where you live, so thank you for that. But if you have questions, you can enter them in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to answer them during the session. Marco, over to you.
Thank you. So about revenues, there's kind of an assumption here that revenues are related only to a service or a product. But in some companies, you may have revenues also connected to even the customer success team, right? So some companies embed the cost of customer success into a product. Some other some of the companies bring it up in the open. So in our company, for example, how are CSMs involved in the revenue conversation? It depends. So if we look after the revenues for our own team, which is customer funded, then our CSMs are fully involved. Actually, they are involved from day one of the renewal, right? Because they give value to what they do, and they prepare for that part of the revenue as soon as the conversation starts. For products and services, what we've seen is that we've been opening the doors to more collaboration with the sales team. It's both internally, pipeline conversations, exposure to what is the plan or the account plan for that particular customer, maybe also giving opportunities for people to shadow, mentor, and learn more. So there's been quite a lot of opening the doors and merging and taking those silos down in a way. So that's about the revenues. Now, second question is other investments. Well, there's a famous do more with less, which is a little bit of, if you look at the sentences, it's quite pushy in a way. But what it means really is, it means you have to think creatively. You may want to organize your team with multi-dimensional metrics, for example. You may specialize people into industries. You may want to specialize people into specific product areas, or even ask teams to dedicate their efforts into specific areas of the journey, of the customer journey, right? So onboarding or whatever. So that can create synergies, and that can make things work more with less. Another idea is customer segmentation. Usually you customer segment based on some rules, but we've been exploring other creative ideas. For example, what about the maturity of the customer? Some customers need more help, some other customers need less. So, we try to adapt to whatever the customer needs. Maybe a customer doesn't need a monthly review. We spend 2 hours with our CSM. They need it quarterly. So what we do is we send it via email for 2 months. Then the third month we get together. The last one I'm gonna, because otherwise I speak too much, but embracing AI is, and I say AI, not necessarily Gen AI. Gen AI is a great door opener for the conversation, but don't forget the AI we've been used to, and this is really both to help customers. So AI that looks at certain thresholds or whatever and gets in touch directly with the customer to say something is wrong or you're using these in the wrong way, but also AI that helps our people to free up some time, some suggestions or some helps.
Marco, you win the award for first question from the audience. There's a direct question on what you just said, so let's double click on this quickly. What do you mean by when you say having CSMs work in a more multi-dimensional way? Maybe we could just explain what that means in just a bit more detail.
So I mentioned the 3 dimensions of the multi-dimensional world, but obviously these may be different. So I mentioned industry, I mentioned product, and I mentioned having people specialize in a certain area of the customer journey. So if you do that, of course, you can bring some synergies together. So let me give you an example. Industry. If you specialize in an industry and you connect a team of customer success managers, particular industry, then you can do 2 or 3 things. You can, first of all, your people will start speaking the language and understand what's going on in that industry. But then you can also see what happens to a certain category of customers in that industry and then use the learnings for other customers there. So you can softly say, other customers in your industry have experienced this challenge or are going through this way. Let me guide you through how you can do it. So that's what I meant. It means focusing in certain areas that make sense for your business and your customers, and then reusing that knowledge in a smart way. Hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Jeff, doing more with less. That's the phrase of the year, the decade. I don't even know what. It's been around forever. It's been applied many times. What are you doing more with less of? And how are you responding to the changing economic conditions? Maybe in a non-revenue way. We talked about revenue. Let's talk about the non-revenue side.
On the non-revenue side, I think one of the main things that we're looking at is, and it's still tied to revenue because everything we do is still connected to revenue, but is going more into a digital customer success motion. So saying, how do we, and again, this connects back, so you'll see a connection between much of what I say. Because of inflation, because of interest rates, because of all these things, everything's getting costlier. So it's not that digital CS replaces a CSM, it's that it augments a CSM. And in some cases, that's the only thing that a company can afford to do for a customer. Maybe because their MRR or their ARR is so low, we can't feasibly make that work out. So what we're exploring is going more digital. So we've been doing digital customer in terms of customer email content for the past couple of years. The team, Michelle and John and Reluka and others have been doing a fantastic job the past couple of years doing webinars, workshops, onboarding cohorts, email campaigns for onboarding, for use case adoption, where we can track a customer has gone through the onboarding phase, and now we see the product usage data telling us, hey, the customer hasn't done this thing yet, or has done this thing but not this thing, and we can send them a certain package of emails to help them. Because we know that a customer, to be successful, and also what they told us, hey, we want GitLab for this thing. Now here's where we can help them, and that goes out to all customers, not just those with a CSM, and not just those customers without a CSM. But the next phase is really saying, okay, and a lot of you on this call are already there with in-app product notifications. We do have customers on SaaS, and we do also have customers on-premise, a little bit trickier. But is in product, is community, is collating all of our docs and documentation. So the how-to guides, the best practices, the rich, deep details into how to run CI/CD or this program or that. Collecting all of that into one place, creating a customer portal, making it super seamless and simple for the customer. That's future vision. That's what we're going to be heading to over the next couple of years. But that's the direction. And I think that helps customers whether they have a CSM or not. Some of the points that Marco talked about and others have talked about has been maybe the customer doesn't necessarily want to talk to us right now. Like they just want to go for their answer. And so this is us extending that. And then over time we'll infuse the CSM with the digital customer success motions overall. Another one that we've been really working on has been, and I touched on it, but it's usage analytics. So just on a call earlier this morning with our CSM team where they were showcasing some highlights where they were able to look at a couple different metrics. And one metric was they were off in the sense, the data, but they were off in the sense that one metric was at one level, another metric was at another level. And you go, if a customer is doing that, they've implemented it wrong. And so they're able to reach out to that customer and work with them and say, hey, let's talk about this. And they were able to dig in and then be able to bring in the EBR into the EBR with the customer to say, here's a better way of doing things. So to wrap up my point, think about what, for you on the call, for everyone on the call, think about what a digital customer success, even if it's an email, even if it's just improving your knowledge base, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be a massive transformation, but just start small and say, what if we made this one small change starting next year for digital customer success? And the second one is usage data and being more creative with your CSMs on how they can use it and how they can help spot trends and obstacles for customers. And again, like you said, Alex, to make the customer successful, not us.
Spot on. Jennifer, anything you want to add on this question before we push ahead?
I think it's to echo really what Jeff, came to mind as soon as you said digital model or some sort of tech touch model. Well, really good success at Zoom is when we launched this sort of learning center, because we need to touch a greater breadth of customers at a lower cost and be more efficient. And so being able to really drive content, the right resources at the right time, whether it's industry, whether it's depending on the products that they're adopting, right, is more important than ever. Something else we do as well as part of some of our tools is that we use webinars, events, right, to really host some of these like lunch and learn sessions, or even like I'm calling them these product innovation sessions. So they see everything that we're offering to our customers. Because in this day and age, right, innovation at speed is everywhere, especially as AI is ramping up. We need to be able to continue driving more and more solutions at a rapid pace, especially as more customers are looking to see how else they can consolidate tools and what else they can evaluate for their business.
Spot on. I think it's one of the greatest juxtapositions in my mind is, or cognitive dissonances, let's say. Customer success focuses all about adoption of the product, but we don't spend enough time thinking about adoption of all of the supporting material to help them self-serve adoption of the product. As in, we have 17 different websites that have some content here, some content there, and this theme of combining it together so it's all accessible in one menu, it feels like such low-hanging fruit, especially when we need to do more with less. Let's shift a little bit to talk about people, right? Our focus in customer success is changing. Revenue, both we've already established revenue and non-revenue. We're being asked to do more with less. We're being asked to return our investment, let's say. How has that changed the personal qualities and competencies that you're looking for when you're making customer success or wider customer experience hires? And Jennifer, let's stay with you on this one.
I love this question. I actually had this conversation with revenue leaders, believe it or not, recently, actually as of this morning. I truly believe that CSMs need to be now on the offense and need to be able to speak confidently beyond just the customer, but also the trends in the industry. What are some of the market leaders performing against them? So I think that we need to look at CSMs as disruptors, right? And what I mean by that is they need to be passionate about the products. They need to keep up with the industry. They need to understand exactly what's out there beyond their key role. They need to have an executive presence, right, to foster relationships, both internally and externally. So with leadership internally, so that we can bring them on into conversations, we can elevate, right, to touch additional lines of business. And of course, externally with the clients, right? And then last but not least, and I'm going to quote a sales peer actually, who said this to me the other day, is having this growth mindset. So learning from your mistakes and translating them into future victories for you and the company. As I said, the market is evolving more than ever and innovating at a very high speed. So if you don't have that willingness to learn or that growth mindset, you will fall behind. So I think those three key aspects are important for CSMs today.
I love growth mindset. And Marco, I know that's something you're particularly passionate about as well. I think I watched a presentation you did on growth mindset about a year ago. So maybe I could ask you a similar question around competencies for customer success managers.
Yes, actually, I couldn't agree more with Jennifer. All the three things that she said are spot on. I think there's the magic word AI, which is coming to us these days, but I'm a little bit beyond the technology these days. I mean, yes, it's good to understand how it works, but I'm just giving for granted it will just, surprise us, and it's here to stay. I think if you look at AI, the next challenge will be about all the conversations on an ethical use of AI. And this is something that our CSMs need to master, because picture this, right? Your customer is using a AI or Gen AI system behind the scenes to animate or, give support of your company live. And one day this bot or this system gives weird answers, right? So how do you educate your customers to ensure that they understand what it means, that they are ready, that there are processes, that there's an ethical executive in the company, that they know how to react? What about PR? They need to go out and place a statement and say, yes, these answers are a little weird, but we're working on it. Then they go back to your company and say, what's happening? And that's within a model, a language model somewhere, not easy to understand why the bot gave those answers. So it's a whole new world. It helps all of us to work differently, but what about how can we help our customers? So I think, skilling in this area, amazing. And another one, but very quickly, I really think our customer success managers need to be entrepreneurs. They need to have that ability to understand things and judge and say, I can help the customers directly, or I need to go and get an expert in a certain area. So those two areas on top of the three ones from Jennifer, I think are focus areas for me.
Jeff, your thoughts?
I don't think I can top either of these. So I'm just going to, Marco and Jennifer, everyone just listen to them. I will add one thing in a different lens. And I'm going back to the poll that we asked at the beginning, which is, do customer success managers own revenue at your company? And it seems like most people said, and there's 67% said yes through upsell, cross-sell, and renewals. But I think for those of whether that your company or whether it's no, CSMs don't, or it's only renewals, or it's this, I think we need to first see what is the charter of the CSM. Are they at your company? Are they the strategic CSM who maybe not is incentivized as strongly as an AE? Maybe they have a bonus, maybe they have some compensation, some variable tied to the renewal or tied to upsell, but their goal is going deep into that customer. They understand the industry, they understand the customer, they understand the business dynamics and what the challenges are within that entire industry and all their competitors. Or they're a technical CSM where they're very strong in that product. I'll pick on GitLab. GitLab's a very technical product. There's a lot of technical products out there. So do you need a technical CSM? You say, actually, CSMs are comped, and like the thing they do is driving upsell, reduction in churn, and then they expand, and then cross-sell. In that case, you want someone more focused on an expand CSM. And so if your business is designed that you are a technical product and you need and your customers are asking for technical CSMs, but then you provide them an expand CSM or some other model, things are going to break down, and they're going to break down really fast. So first figure out what the business, or at least better yet, figure out what the customer needs, and then flow that through to the business, and then design your job description around that.
I think same could be said for the whole go-to-market motion, right? And I think, Jennifer, you touched on that when you spoke about Zoom shifting to be a little bit more solution and solution-led consultative, given the changing climate. So I think that's a really interesting point. Speaking of sales and selling things, obviously we got to measure what we sell. So let's shift a little bit to the KPIs that we're tracking. There's actually a question that we'll answer as part of this as well. Jeff, we'll stay with you. How have the KPIs you track changed for your team as your goals and teams have shifted in the last year or two?
I think there's been more of a focus on product adoption because that relates to retention. So is the customer and all of the user, or not all the users, but a majority of the users adopting these different use cases and adopting them in sequence? So for us, we're a platform. So for a customer to get value out of GitLab, it's not just that they're using GitLab for one thing or two things. I've worked at other places before where it's more of a single point solution, and that's perfect. And I've worked at other companies where they've had a platform. And so you need to know what it is that you're driving. And so I have been at companies where it's like, hey, as long as the customer is doing this one thing, that's all that matters. And then they're pretty sticky. And then at companies where it's more of a platform, you need to think about, okay, it's not just that one thing, but the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And so for us, platform adoption has become more important than ever before because of the renewal or the retention, making sure the customer is satisfied, making sure the customer is getting the outcomes that they want and that they expect. So in the past, it's been more sales focused metrics. And over the past year and a half, we've become much more customer centric. So looking at, is the customer getting value? Let's have the CSM validate those outcomes from the customer. So instead of us saying, hey, we think, like the metrics say that the customer is getting value, and it's like, cool, check that box, like we're good to go. We now enforce, at least for the CSM level accounts, we now have a verified outcomes piece where we're going to the customer and we're saying, hey, we believe that you've succeeded in this outcome. Do you agree? Do you disagree? and then we have a conversation about it. And then out of that, we can say, yes, the customer did. And then now that's a much more customer-centric approach to knowing, is the customer actually getting value out of it? Additional things, some other ones, because of deal cycles elongating, because of renewals getting trickier, we now pay much more attention, not just to what's available to renew, but on-time renewals and late renewals, and then say very late renewals, where something might get stuck in a contract negotiation. And that happens for every company. And that will always be the case. But I think across the industry, not just at my company, but across the industry, we're seeing those deal cycles elongate, and that's creating more friction for late renewals and more problems for CSMs or sales reps or renewal managers or whatever your company might have. And then also focuses on things like license utilization, time to value metrics. Is the CSM running workshops, and how many customers have had a workshop with the CSM? Are we running the EBRs? And then how long has it been since we've had an EBR? And then last one would be executive stakeholders. Like, do we actually have an executive stakeholder meeting with their executive? How long has it been? What's the topic on? What feedback is the CSM getting? So that's a smattering of the metrics that we've adopted more of in the past year, which I'm excited about, pushing us to be more customer centric. And I think the big one, if you didn't hear anything that I said, the big one is, are they adopting more of the platform? Yes or no? And then if yes, cool. How much more? And then if no, what do we need to do to get there?
Love it. And it's ironic that you're focusing a little bit more on the leading drivers that lead to commercial outcomes later, right? So we're focusing more on revenue, but actually then focusing on things at the start, which is spot on. Marco, what are your thoughts in terms of trends in how KPIs are changing?
Yeah. So we have a plethora of KPIs in our company, really quite a few of them. And personally, I would love to see a little bit of consolidation every now and then, but it's the opposite. Every now and then we have new ones. So I thought I'd maybe just mention 2 or 3 of the new ones that I've seen popping into our organization. So one is about revenues. So we have always looked for upsells and cross sells from our team, but it's been an informal way of doing that, right? You would spot an opportunity, go to the sales team, share that, and they would work on that to make it happen. But now I've seen we're now putting that formally in the system, and we're tracking it for the moment, right? So obviously these changes are big. You can't expect all of a sudden to say, hey, you're now measured on sales because you're not a salesperson. We didn't hire you as a salesperson. We need to give you the tools, the training, and all that. So it's a slow process, but at least we are, it's formally there now. We're tracking it. There's a little bit of recognition, let's say, when you succeed in that. So that's one. The other one is customer focused. We are stepping up into operational health, which many companies have. Within that, it's a container. It can mean many things, but for a company like Microsoft with hundreds of products, it can be quite complicated. But we are getting some intelligence in that. There's a number at the end. It says how the customer are using our products, good or bad, and obviously we track progress with that. And the third one is maybe we could say revenue, but maybe it's more in a way people related. It's about protecting some of the teams. So when we sell or when we engage with customers with success contracts, there are some teams and therefore people that are activated within that contract to serve our customers. So we have a KPI that measures how the bookings go. So we want to ensure that we don't hit bottlenecks because, for example, customers are all asking for our resources in a certain time of the year. And maybe during Christmas time, for obvious reasons, there's less demand. So we're trying to track the going or the bookings of our resources to protect our teams so we can scale them properly and ensure that they can be in a healthy state.
Sure. To to do more with less, to use your phrase that you've introduced. I think that's exactly right. Jennifer, I'll finish with you here, and we can move to our final question after this. But we've already talked a lot about how your upsell approach has changed in reaction to your customer and the change in the economy. So how does that change how you measure success of your team?
Yeah, I was thinking about this after Jeff and Margot covered a lot of it, but there's this notion around CSQLs, right? Customer success qualified leads. That can mean many different things. And I'm not just talking about mining opportunities, finding a new product, right? But something that we look at as well is, we're really focused on beta programs, similar to Microsoft. Zoom has been innovating. Actually, we're at almost 20 products now in the last year. And so it's really important to really get our customers in these betas, right? And also innovate alongside with us. And what I mean by that is they're influencing the roadmap. So as we are driving revenue with them with upsell, it also is looking at long-term success with them, long-term revenue. And so it's really just having, a focus on, like I said, these beta programs and this product education so that it naturally then leads to the qualified opportunity versus just targeting them, right, for a specific product and making it more of that hard sell approach that we've seen from over the years. And so, again, it's just looking at these sort of innovative strategies for us to almost be these incognito sellers, right? And I know that's controversial. We don't want to say we're sellers, but at the end of the day, revenue moves the company, right? And all of us are kind of tied to that North Star of whether it's NRR, right, or customer lifetime value.
Yeah, we've got to return our investment, right? I mean, I think as a team and as a function, I think you're absolutely right. We are getting close to the end of our time here, and I want to respect the few questions that we have from our audience. But before we get to those questions, I'm going to ask our panelists to do an even more lightning round than the last one. We've talked today about change and how the business environment that we operate in as a customer success function has shifted, and that means that we've had to innovate. I want to fast forward to the end, let's say, of 2025. What's the biggest thing in your mind that will be different about how we approach customer success at that point in time? Marco, why don't you go first?
We need to grow up. I think that's the bottom line. We have to stop filling in for the other teams. We need to define better what we do. We definitely need to look after revenues, retention, generation, and in a way, and that's a little bit provocative, is we have to probably do a little bit of sacrifice, right? So if, for example, the product is not right, then we just can't keep fixing it as a CS organization or team. We need to maybe give something back to the Q&A department, and let them do a better product. If the salespeople sell because they just want to sell to a customer, and then customer doesn't need everything that they sold, that's a bad sale. So in a way, we need to grow up. We need to have a seat at the conversation table, which is thanks to the revenues, and define more who we are, what we want to do. Can't be the catch-all for everything.
Well put. Jeff, ultra lightning. What's the number one thing you think is going to change by the end of 2025 for customer success?
I can't give one. I'll give three. I think one, CSM as a term, as a title, will become more congruent across the industry. Two, back to Marco's point, AI will have a significantly bigger role in all that we do, and yeah, I'll just leave it there. And then I think the other one is that we'll see CSMs become either more renewal focused or more strategic. And that kind of goes a little bit against my first point, but I think we'll, over this time, we'll see them become much more revenue centered as we progress through this time.
Nice. That was lightning. 0 seconds left. Jennifer, extra lightning. Last word to you. 2025 customer success. How has it changed?
I'm going to do the rule of three, but I speak fast, so I think we'll be fine. So I think the first being we need to evolve CS, similar to what Marco said, but be very dynamic. We're beyond just a post-sales motion. I think businesses need to evaluate where CS sits. Is it pre-sales? Is it post-sales? Is it as a highly skilled product overlay, right? As a specialist or some sort of architect? Why to do that is just to see where the impact of revenue will be quicker, right? For our customers at the day and for the business. The second piece is CS is a paid service. I've actually seen this in many companies now. And so same vein as PSO or professional services, excuse me, managed services and training, right? Like means having a very established structured engagement internally and swim lanes and expectations of clients. And then I will bring it back to both Marco and Jeff, as they both said it, but AI, not just throwing AI lightly, but really just for scale, for low cost efficiency and just working smarter, right? So being able to leverage AI tools today for personalized communication, frequent touch points, just really driving the appropriate content, right, for greater engagement and collaboration overall.
I love it. Here's the great news about this. We've come to the end of our panel, firstly. Maybe that's not so great news. I hope you enjoyed it. But the great news is we've all earned ourselves an invitation back to happily end of 2025 so we can learn if our predictions were correct. So see you all there. On a serious note, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. Delighted to welcome back to the stage Tom Shelley with the leaderboard scoring to find out who won credits for the super cool Happily swag store. Unfortunately, panelists are not eligible, but thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.